today we have one of the nation's most respected authorities on cybersecurity, Teresa Payton, with us, and she was on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart back in January. The specter of a massive cyber attack is the most urgent concern confronting the nation's information technology infrastructure today, an issue Teresa Payton understands better than anyone. Teresa is a leading expert on internet security, net crime, fraud mitigation, and technology implementation. As White House Chief Information Officer from 2006 to 2008, she administered the Information Technology Enterprise for the President and 3,000 staff members. Prior to working in federal government, Payton held executive roles in banking technology at the Bank of America and Wells Fargo. As founder of Fortalice LLC, a security risk and fraud consulting company, she now lends her expertise to organizations large and small, helping them improve their information technology systems against emerging cyber threats. In 2010, she was named by Security Magazine as one of the top 25 most influential people in security. She serves as a cyber expert for the syndicated program America Now and is co-author of Protecting Your Internet Identity, Are You Naked Online? Now, some of this is about password protection, and of course my strategy is I put my passwords on a Post-it note and put it underneath the podium so it's available to me at an instant. I think Teresa might have a comment or two about that. So ladies and gentlemen, I want you to fasten your seatbelts, hold on to your electronic devices, and join me in welcoming Teresa Payton.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Hey, it's great to be here with you. Thank you, CalPERS, for putting me on the agenda. And thank you for, on such a sunny, gorgeous day, dedicating some time to talk about what can be a dark and gloomy topic, right? Cybersecurity. So I question your judgment, or I applaud you for your diligence for your company. So I'll go for diligence. I really want to just kind of set the stage here around what we're going to be doing here for the next hour. So I've got time with you. I've got prepared remarks that I worked on with CalPERS. And I actually created a takeaway packet, which they're going to put up on the website in the next few days. And so I want you to be able to kick back, relax, listen to some of the ideas that I'm sharing, and then go back to the office and use this takeaway packet. Now, don't relax too much because I'll actually call on you if you fall asleep after lunch. Hopefully you won't. But we're really going to be spending this time talking about how to fight cybercrime within your organizations. And why is this one of my favorite groups of people to talk to? Because you're the team that's going to make this happen. And you're thinking, she's not talking to security people. Did anybody fill her in on that? Because you're the team that's going to make that happen. You're the one that is thinking about employees. You're thinking about the rules. You're thinking about the finances. You're thinking about the customer. You're a big part of the leadership team that's going to improve the security strategy of your organization. So I'm really looking forward to not only talking to you about a couple things that I'm seeing and sharing some ideas, but also hearing from you in the question and answer session. And we're going to have a question and answer session. If you don't ask me questions, I ask you questions. So it's going to happen. But the first thing I want to do is I want to really set the stage that everything is hackable. All technology, the best and the brightest, cannot keep the bad guys out. The reason why fighting cybercrime is so important is when you really think about it, at the bottom of all the evil that goes on in the world, it needs money to happen, right? Human trafficking, child pornography, drug running, terrorism, it needs money. Where does it get the money? If you follow the money that's stolen through cybercrime, evil gets money through cybercrime. So every time we push bad guys out of your organization, you fought evil. And to me, that's a great day in my book, right? When we win and we fight evil. So that's what we're going to talk about doing, is finding creative, innovative ways to fight evil, fight cybercrime in your organizations. And it doesn't always require opening your checkbook, which that's pretty cool, right? The finance people in the room, do I get a whoop whoop, right? Okay. So, a couple of pictures. I was asked to share just a little bit about, sort of a few things from the White House, and I always get asked, what was it like there? So, a couple quick pictures. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we don't have a lot of time together. But there's a picture of me with my family. The gentleman with his arm around me, that's the president. And my husband's next to him. My 2 boys, and I'm pregnant with my little girl, Maeve, there. I'm 7 months pregnant. And then I've got a picture of me holding my oldest son, and he's about 4 at the time, in front of the real press podium. And they call the podium the Blue Goose. And if the president were actually there, present in the room, or getting ready for a press briefing, it would actually have the presidential seal. But that's the one where, like, you'll see the White House press secretary or the president stand behind to tell you the news. And it dawned on me, wouldn't it be great if we had a 4-year-old giving us our press briefings? I mean, couldn't you imagine, like, the unbridled just honesty, just whatever is in their head going on? The other picture I want to point out to you, because this is part of, your job is not too dissimilar from this job at the White House. Obviously, different boss, different mission. But if you think about it, the people that you serve, they want the latest and greatest technology, and don't they deserve it? They want to be mobile and global and on the go. And the White House doesn't just stay at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They're mobile and global. They're on the airplanes. They're on the helicopters, Camp David, personal residences. And there was this constant battle with how do we enable and empower these really important people, which your clients are really important people, to do their jobs while at the same time protecting them, making sure that they're physically safe and that digitally the communications are safe. So you're having to strike that balance as well. And then the only other picture I'll point out is one of the things I went through. That's a picture of me with one of my special ops trainers. I actually went through a hostage-taking exercise where I learned to conduct myself if I were taken hostage, how to spot that maybe a rescue's on the way. And then they ask you, what do you want to be after, you have to be trained to be an asset because they've got to go back to where they were before they drop you off. So they're like, what would you like to be trained in? And I said, special assault weapons, why not? So I learned that day I was a natural good shot. I just mentioned that just, when you're doing your speaker evaluation forms, just something to keep in mind. Okay, so I'd like to again, just to get us all on the same page, I'd like to do a visual poll. And so if everybody wouldn't mind standing up, I know that's a little difficult, but it's after lunch, and it's kind of good to stand up anyways. You guys look awesome. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is do not self-identify your organization, because this is not about public embarrassment. That's a different keynote. So think about an organization where your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, your loved ones work, and if they've been breached in the last 12 to 18 months, you may sit down. Okay, so take a look around the room. You've got people sitting down. Okay, for those of you standing, this can be personal. It can be friends, family, loved ones. If anyone has been notified in your circle of friends, family, coworkers, yourself, that you've been a victim of a breach, credit card, identity theft, information, social security number, you can go ahead and sit down. And there's a few people in here whose friends are off the grid, clearly. You all were great sports. Thank you for taking that visual poll. But do you see, everything is hackable. And so what we have to have is we definitely have to have a good protection strategy, because nobody likes to be the victim of a breach as a consumer or as an organization. But we also need to be thinking about how will we recover. So a couple of things to be thinking about. One is you have to have a creative and innovative approach. You cannot spend your way out of this. Think of all the big names that have been victims of a breach. Target, right? Home Depot, Pentagon. They've been victims of a breach. These are very smart, bright, talented people. Okay, so we've got to be creative and innovative. You have to build in safety nets, and then I want you to build out a neighborhood watch, and you are the start of that neighborhood watch. Okay, and now just so you don't know what I'm going to do next, I'm getting off stage. And I'm just gonna walk around and just make sure like I'm connecting with people and nobody's sleeping and all that kind of stuff. Okay, awesome. All right, so the first thing I want to talk to you about is some of the emerging threats. And I've got some things up here, of course you can read it for yourself. But the one I really want to get into is, how many of you, and you can just raise your hand, have any type of a relationship? It can be a financial relationship. I mean, don't go into personal. I mean business relationships. How many of you have a business relationship with, it could be your bank or somebody else, could even be Google, where they will send you to your mobile phone a code that you key in and they say, now I know it's really you. Just raise your hand. Okay, so be prepared. That's not gonna work in a couple years. And if you're doing that within your own organizations, with your own either employees or your own clients, you need to be thinking about the next strategy. Why? Because what we're seeing in the cyber criminal network is the mobile malware kits have gone down in price. What does that mean? It's like a fire sale on smartphones and mobile devices, being able to send malware to them. What does that mean? So a lot of times, the reason why people do cybercrime, they're evil, they're lazy, okay? Because if they weren't lazy and they were industrious, they would help us find cures for diseases instead of doing what they do, right? Stealing money out of our pockets and doing evil things. So what is sort of the pathology of cyber criminals? They go where the action is. They go where there's the least chance of getting caught, the cheapest way to get it done, and the fastest way to run off with the money, okay? That's how typical pathology of cyber criminals act. Not all, but typical. So now we are seeing in the cyber criminal underground, we could buy mobile malware kits. It used to be thousands of dollars. It's now bundled together with other things. You literally can buy the mobile malware kit, and if you don't really know what to do with it, you can actually set it up to launch the attack for you. So you pick out the company name. Yeah, you pick out the company name. Yeah, where can you get one? Exactly, Nick says, right? He's a good guy. He just wanted to see it for himself, that's all, right? On the dark web, I'll do a demonstration later. Okay, so the price of that, it's going down. So my point in bringing that up is you need to always be thinking ahead. These protection strategies are good strategies, but they're gonna go where the action is. They're gonna figure this out. So you always need to be thinking, okay, what would I do next? Or if they figure out how to get past my defenses, how do I block them into a corner so they only get away with a little bit and not with everything, right? So that's kind of the key takeaway there. I wanna change sort of the conversation with the CEO, with the board. So one of the things, at the White House, the senior staff was very good at coming in and thanking my team for a job well done. So for example, when you walked into the convention center and the air conditioning was on and the bathrooms were clean and the lights were on, did you call anybody and say thank you? But if one of those went awry, we won't get too detailed about that because we just had lunch, but if one of those things went awry, you wouldn't be happy and you'd be like, who do I call? So kind of a great leadership principle that I saw was they would do a good job coming to thank the staff. But one day, somebody on senior staff actually, sitting at a table like this, really like bright, hardworking people, sat down and said, so what are you guys doing to make sure we never, ever, ever get hacked? Do you think that opened up a dialogue for talking about our challenges and problems? No way. Everybody stopped looking at senior staff and everybody looked at me to see what I was gonna say. And I said, well, we are doing a lot to prevent us from being hacked, we hope. And if you come by in 2 weeks, we're actually practicing a digital disaster. In the event we are breached, we want to be ready. And then after that group meeting, I went and stopped by the senior staffer, and I said, I really appreciate you taking the time out to thank the team. And I said, candidly, when you talk, especially to security people, when you say something like that, they don't feel like they can really give you the honest ground truth about what's going on because they know everything's hackable. So I want to change the conversation, and if you have a good relationship with your CEO, your board, I want you to take this message back to them, okay? So if they change the conversation just a little bit and say, what are we doing so that we don't get hacked? And I don't like this fact, but I know that we may get hacked one day. So if somebody breaks in, what is your worst nightmare, and how can I help you? Do you see how that totally changes the dynamic of that conversation? how you can actually open up dialogue. But then I said to the senior staffer, be prepared, because the nightmares are horrible. I mean, I'm just telling you, once they open up, you got to be ready for what they open up and tell you. Okay, so one of the things is, again, I want to get back to you can't spend your way out of this. A lot of times executives will say, you know, Teresa, if I could just write a check tomorrow, I need to go back to business as usual. I need to stop talking about security. So what kind of check can I write so I can go back to business as usual? And a lot of times my answer is, oh, honey, this is your business as usual, right? So what I can tell you is, whether it was at the White House, the bank, or now in the private sector, we always look at the total cost of a hack, these illegal hacks. So when somebody asks us to hack into their company on their behalf, and the total cost of all of these hacks, and we've never met something we couldn't break into legally, less than $1 million. How many of you think you can protect yourself 100% of the time for less than $1 million, right? So this is where the creativity piece has to come in. So that's where we talked about, could I tell some stories from the White House? And I'm like, oh, I can't tell that one. They can't live afterwards. Okay, so this is one you can, and I thought you would think that was cool. So we had this one challenge with BlackBerries. Okay, and I know I have Canadians in the room, and I'm really pulling for BlackBerry to come back one day, because I think it's a really solid device. So, you know, go Canada on that one. Just keep plugging away at that. But on the BlackBerries, what was interesting, I was at the White House for about 30 days, and I got this report in, and the report is called the Lost, Stolen, and Damaged Equipment Report. And so I'm flipping through it, and I don't see anything unusual like I didn't see at the banks, right? So I'm like, okay, you know, this makes sense. And then I get to the lost and stolen BlackBerries. And I noticed that some people are not telling us their BlackBerry is missing on average an 18-hour average. And I think, oh my gosh, this is the White House. Like, these would be people I would think would call us right away. Why aren't they calling us? So I thought to myself, well, maybe it's because they know we encrypt the device and we password protect them. Well, logical. Maybe it's because they know we can actually kill on command. No, the devices, not the people. The devices, all right? I'm like, no, that can't be it. So I have this like leadership principle around innovation. You can't plan it. Like, I had this one boss at the bank, and he was like, we need to be more innovative. So from 9 to 10 on Wednesdays, we're gonna talk innovation. And I'm like, honey, it doesn't work that way. You can't plan innovation. You have to like live it. It's cultural. It's like a way of being. People have to trust you. Like, if they come up with a crazy idea, you won't laugh. And so I always came up with this principle that worked really well, where I would just write it on the whiteboard, and I'd say, no deadline. I'll never ask you about it. You can ask me anything you want about the problem, but I won't ask you, how are we doing? There's no deadline, there's no budget, there's no politics, there's no dumb idea. And sometimes over the years, like, a problem sat up there for like a year, and I didn't erase it and put a new one, I just left it. And so a couple weeks goes by, and my team comes in and they said, ma'am, we think we have a solution as to why people are taking so long to tell us their BlackBerry's missing. And I said, great. And they said, well, it's a two-part plan. And I said, awesome. Okay, well, what's the plan? And they said, well, the first thing is we were looking at the language we make people sign when we give them their BlackBerry. And we called a couple people that were on the list that we know and trust. And they slid us this piece of paper. And I said, I know, I signed this. And they said, no, ma'am, don't read it like you, like a geek. Read it like them, the customer. And see, what you have to realize is geeks, like, we're always attached to our phone, except for in the shower, because that wouldn't work really well. And like right now, I'm a little nervous because it's up there on the podium, but I pretty much trust everybody here, and it'll zap you if you're not me when you pick it up. So I'm kidding about that. But so we, like, you know, turn our phones on vibrate and put them in our pillow because we're on production support calls and we don't want to wake up our family. I mean, that's kind of how you live with your phone. So I read it for the first time as a customer, and it said, I understand this is punishable to the fullest extent of the law. Okay, this explains a lot of things. One, they literally were like, you are the last group I will call because I don't know what will happen. I could go to jail, I could lose my job, I don't know, but I know it's punishable to the fullest extent of some law. I'm not sure the law, but some law, so why would I call you and tell you it's missing? You are my last resort when I'm totally desperate. Okay, so taxpayer dollars pay for BlackBerry, so you want to make sure you're serious, but you could soften that language a little bit. So we get permission from White House counsel to soften it. And I said, well, is that really going to solve the problem? They said, nope, that's the second part. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And they said, well, we were thinking we want senior staff to feel about us the way we feel about a Happy Meal. And I'm like, okay, I'm a vegetarian. It's kind of lost on me. They don't have vegetable Happy Meals. But tell me what you're talking about. And they said, well, you know how you get the beef, and then you got the toy and the game, so even after the beef is gone, it's kind of fun. And so I'm standing there, I'm like, are we hugging Dick Cheney and Karl Rove? I mean, I can work on that. I don't know how it's going to go over, and they said, no. What we want to do, and they actually had a prototype, and I'm going to stand up here so everybody can see the imaginary prototype. But they did a prototype where they got a 1-gallon Ziploc baggie. And in the baggie, they put the BlackBerry. And then what they did was they had one card. They put that in there. And then all around the BlackBerry in this see-through Ziploc baggie, presidential M&Ms, presidential pins, presidential pens, everything presidential. It was stuffed chock full. I mean, it was so cool, I wanted one. And I'm looking, I'm like, this is brilliant. So what are we going to do? So they said, well, we're going to change the security briefing. It used to be 45 minutes. We never got to tell it to the senior staff because they have meetings in 15-minute increments. So we would get the admin or the intern, and they didn't really listen. So what we've done is we've changed the briefing. So I said, great. How does the briefing go? So this is how it goes. And I'm going to go down here just to do a demonstration at this table. Well, I better take my clicker with me. So I also have another leadership principle, which is if you're going to fail, fail quick and small. Fail quick and small. So there's 13 components at the White House that make up the executive office of the president. So we piloted this new concept in one of the 13 components. Now, what's your name? Danielle, hey, nice to meet you. So Danielle, I'm going to give you the new briefing, okay? Instead of the 45 minutes, this is how it goes. Hi, Danielle, here is your new BlackBerry and your BlackBerry Happy Meal. Here you go. All right, so if you want to go ahead and pull the BlackBerry out. All right, there's a card in there. You want to pull that out for me? Okay, it doesn't say White House on it because we don't want the bad guys to know in case you lose the card, like our process. So, okay, there's one phone number on there. This is your one-stop 24 by 365, 366 on a leap year. Call us. Damaged, lost, stolen. Call us in a moment's notice. We can probably locate your BlackBerry for you. A lot of times it's under the car seat. But we can find it for you. If not, we can actually issue a kill command of the BlackBerry and get you a new one and figure things out later. Second thing, if you travel, foreign travel, this may not be the right device for you. When you go over to protect you and protect your communications, we will issue you a different device. Call that same number. We'll take care of all your needs. Have any questions, Danielle? No. Okay, thanks, Danielle. We really appreciate it. So Danielle now has to go to her next meeting. And she takes her bag with her. Now, before I get into where she goes and what she does with it, do you think by softening the language and giving her that briefing of, here's your number to call us at a moment's notice, we think we could find your BlackBerry, do you think the time of 18 hours went down to like half an hour to an hour? Absolutely. What was the cost of that? Ziploc baggies and M&Ms we already had. Okay. So now we had an unexpected benefit, though. Danielle is in the component that's piloting. She runs off to the next meeting, but she hasn't finished looking at her goodie bag, so she takes it with her. She sits down next to Bill. Bill is not in the pilot group. Bill says, Danielle, what's that? Danielle says, yeah, it's my BlackBerry Happy Meal. Bill says, how do I get one? How do I get one? I've had a BlackBerry for a year. I never got one of these. Danielle now feels superior to Bill. And she says, clearly, Bill, you did not sit through the security briefing. And Bill says, I did. It was 45 minutes of doom and gloom. Didn't really understand it, but I know one thing. I'm never going to call them if my BlackBerry's missing, right? So now people are calling my organization begging for a security briefing so they can get a BlackBerry Happy Meal. How many of you have begged for security briefing? Okay, so what did that cost? Just a fabulous idea. Did I come up with this idea? No, I did not. My team did. They're amazing. So Innovation and creativity, thinking differently about this problem. It's not always about saying no. It's not always about a shiny new tool. It's not always about opening the checkbook. It's being creative, thinking differently, thinking about hearts and minds of people and making it easy for them to comply with your protocols, okay? All right, for those of you in the front, can you tell the people in the back? How about at this table? What are they looking at here?
Just a tire from a bike.
A tire from a bike. Is the tire fabulously protected?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So what are we looking at here? So I took this picture for you. This is my graphic contribution today to your PowerPoint. So I thought this is exactly what is wrong with our security strategy today, and this is why this group is the right group to talk to about this. Because companies create data. You've got this big, your organization has a big enterprise of data. You have all the pension plans. You have all the people participating in them. You've got all the iterations of all the different plans. Now you've moved to a new plan where new employees of counties, state governments, et cetera, are in this plan, right? So you've got all this data. And then you buy your security tools to protect all this data. But because you didn't evaluate the full bicycle, you actually protected probably the least valuable part of the bike other than the horn. I mean, it would have been more comical if the horn was left. Okay, so where did I take this picture? I took it in broad daylight in Washington, D.C. So in the morning, I'm going to work, everybody's locking up their bikes, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's a great day to be riding into work on a bike. And at the end of the day, I come back and I realize that if I hurry up, I can get a run in around the White House and the monuments before it gets totally dark. Because I'm a geek, I run with my phone, and I come running back, and that's when I see the bicycle wheel. Broad daylight, busy street, and I'm thinking to myself, what did the person do in front of all these people? Like, oh, I'll be back for the wheel? I'm just gonna be right back. And I thought, the person had the forethought, they bought the lock. They locked the bicycle. It was a very tall sign. It was like a 10-foot sign. Well, I'm 5 foot, so everything to me is like 10 foot. So it's like a 10-foot sign, big sign on top. There's no way. I mean, it looked impenetrable. And that's how these technology tools fool us. And so if we don't take a step back and think about, what am I protecting here anyways? What is the most valuable asset that if they steal it, I can't ride my bike home? I mean, you could ride if you locked it up in a certain way and they stole the front tire, you could pop a wheelie all the way home, right? You could still use it. And you could get another wheel. Now you're walking into a bike shop. Can I buy a frame to go with this bike? This bicycle wheel? So I want us to think differently about, you got to get really focused on what it is you're trying to protect. You're not trying to protect, candidly, you're not trying to protect the whole infrastructure. You're not trying to protect the whole network. You're trying to protect that most valuable data. What is it? What is it for your organization? I can take a few guesses. It's the plan participants. It's the beneficiaries. It's all that private and personal information. It's anything that gets you in trouble with your regulators if it gets stolen, right? I mean, there's a fairly simple way to tick off the most important assets. Okay, and big data. I'm sorry, when you say big data, my husband's a Trekkie fan. I think of a bunch of big data from Star Trek standing around, don't you? But the reason why I bring this up is I think that big data analytics can help and hurt. Okay, so one example where it can really hurt is there was a wealth management investment company, and they were using the power of big data to help them know their customers better. So do any of you know wealth management advisors? I mean, they work a portfolio of 250 to 400 customers. 365 days a year, right? And you're not working all of those days, or some days it feels like you are, but you're supposed to know them and retain them and cross-sell them. This is hard to do. So they use big data to create psychological profiles on their customers, and oh, by the way, nickname them too. Nickname them. Things like Crazy Sally, she sells at the drop of a hat. She just whiffs the markets moving, and everything needs to be sold and go into gold and cash. She's crazy. And then Bob, he'll buy anything I sell him. There's nothing he won't buy. And then I've got somebody who's stuck over here. So you had all these profiles. Oops. I get so excited, I just jump ahead. So you've got all these profiles. Now, as financial services companies do, they reorganized. So everybody moves on, the data remains. Who's watching the data? Hackers hack in, steal the data, the nicknames, and the social profiles. post them on Pastebin, and then they try to sell the data to their competitors. One of their competitors thinks this is not really right, warns the wealth management company. Not before, of course, some of the customers saw their nicknames. Just saying, do you want to see your nicknames that your service providers might have for you? Posted on the internet. So that's how big data could really be a problem. This is why you've got to be thinking about the problem of the bicycle wheel and the bike lock. What is my most important asset? What am I trying to protect? Now, what I like about big data is you can use behavioral-based analytics to help you fight cybercrime. What do I mean there? So if you look, for example, at Target, the Achilles heel in many breaches tends to be through your vendor suppliers. Target is no exception. And they actually had alarms going off, but they had a lot of other things going on that day. Now, if they had had behavioral-based analytics between Target and their vendor, does anybody remember what type of vendor it was? A heating and cooling vendor. Okay, do you think a heating and cooling vendor was sitting around in October thinking, I'm going to take down Target? No, and that's often how it happens. The vendors who supply to companies, they don't think they're on anybody's radar. They don't understand that they're just a pass-through to the intended target, which is what you could be. Maybe you are not the intended target. Maybe it's somebody that you serve that is the intended target. Okay, so you are on somebody's radar. The minute you plug into the internet starts trying to figure out who you are, what device, what's it connected to, what's going on. It's amazing. When you literally plug into the internet, you can see the whole internet just trying to check it out. It's almost like germs in the body looking at another, looking like white cells and blood cells looking at each other, right? So with big data, if they had set that up, what they would have seen when the breach was occurring was there's a normal baseline of traffic that goes on between that heating and chilling vendor and Target. Now, when the cyber criminals broke into the heating and chilling vendor and started knocking around and figured out, whoa, I see Target, and I see Target's point of sale, they got greedy and they started running back and forth across that pipe to deposit all of the black malware to the point of sale. That's the name of the malware, black malware, POS. They would have seen that that behavior was wrong and said, okay, do we have a fire? Do we have an outage? Like, what's going on here? So if you put big data, behavioral-based analytics to work for you, there's a couple of things you could be looking for. One, you could baseline your vendor activity. And when it gets out of the norm, have they been hacked? Do they have a bad egg working for them that is downloading your data? Two, you can also, within your own network, by application and by person, baseline their behavior. And if all of a sudden Bob has behavior out of the norm, there's a couple logical explanations. One, Bob's a good guy, but he's been assigned to work on a board report, so he's downloading all the data to get really smart. Two, Bob's credentials have been compromised, and he doesn't even know what's going on. Three, Bob's a bad egg, and you need to handcuff him and take him out. There's maybe a few other logical explanations, but those are three. So if you get that behavioral-based analytics, that's really going to help you in fighting cybercrime. Okay, something is discovered every 90 seconds. Does anybody want to take a guess what it is? Okay, so I'm going to give you a little phrase that you can say at cocktail parties, and it's really cool. Really cool. You get to speak geek. So everybody repeat after me. You ready? All right, a new deviant. You could do better than that. All right, let's try it again. All right, every 90 seconds, a new deviant of malware is discovered in the wild. What'd you just say? I don't know. Sounds like a zombie apocalypse. It's like great for Halloween, isn't it? Okay, so let's just break down what you said. So there's tools out there. I can take a piece of malware today, and I've got tools out there that I can literally change a few lines of the code in the malware. I don't have to be super technical to do it. And then I can actually run it against a tool that says, yep, that gets past McAfee now. Nope, you're still not going to get past Norton. Yep, you're going to get past Sophos. And it'll literally help me create a new deviant of malware to release in the wild, which is the internet. So every 90 seconds, a new deviant of malware is being found in the wild. So on a good day, how much do you think your antivirus, anti-malware software is stopping? On a good day. 1/3 of all bad stuff. 1/3, 1/4. That means 2/3, 3/4 do what? Get through. Okay, so how many of you have seen no one here is old enough to see the originals, but how many of you have seen the Lucille Ball Chocolate Factory? Anybody have that as a favorite? Anybody have that as they're like, well, if I raise my hand, will she call on me? Oh. I think you had your hand up. Yeah. Okay, what's your name?
Ken.
Ken, hey Ken, good to see you.
See you.
What happened in the chocolate factory?
I think they were getting behind,
They were getting behind on the line.
eating it instead.
They started eating it and stuffing it in their hair and their clothes, right? Okay, do you guys have a visual of that? Okay, so that's your security operations center. It's crazy back there. Every 90 seconds, new deviant malware is found in the wild. You've got malware kits for mobile going down and getting cheap. It's crazy. It's not, everybody hears incident response management, and you think of people in uniforms, and it's really neat and orderly. It's crazy. It's crazy to keep up with this. And the challenge is just like I was telling you about Target and thinking differently, the Achilles heel tends to be vendors. And it's, less than 30% are really saying that I definitely require my vendors to have at least as strong a security as I require of myself. So how do you do that? So in that takeaway packet that you're going to get from CalPERS, it actually has some of the tough questions you can ask your vendors. Now, how many of you, for the same exact result, would rather spend $680,000, $683,000 instead of $162,000? Anyone? Sounds like a government contractor project or something. I don't know. I'm sorry. Anybody? So what does this figure represent? So there was a control group study done of companies who do end user education and awareness for cybersecurity and those who don't. And the ones who did do the end user education awareness and had a breach, the average cost of the breach was $162,000. The ones who didn't and had a breach, the average cost of the breach was $683,000. So that whole education and awareness really works. And that is not the snooze, you lose CBTs that people do, that organizations do. I can't stand those. I cannot stand it's our annual cybersecurity computer-based training, click, 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 take the little quiz. You're done, isn't that great? And then everybody goes to a conference and picks up all the free crap. I love that. I was saying to Bill earlier, I'm like, if I were an evil person, I would go to conferences and hand out cute little USBs that turn into panda fans, and I would hand out thumb drives with an unexpected bonus. People love free stuff. They love free stuff, and they take it and they plug it in their computer. And I always say to people, why would you do that? Would you go, I was in a hotel last night because I want to make sure I was here for today, right? Not worry about flights. There's no way I would go into the lobby and pick up a toothbrush and use it. Oh, that's how I look at getting free stuff that's technology. I would never use a free USB or the thing you plug in and it turns into a cute little fan. I know they're adorable. You don't know where it came from. You don't know where it's been, okay? Did your mama teach you this stuff? So I always say if I was a bad guy, that's what I would do. I'd hang out in conferences. If you got free stuff from CalPERS, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. Okay, so I want you to remember that you personally and your coworkers and your loved ones, you are the weakest link. Isn't that a great show? That was a great show. You are the weakest link. So a study was done of all breaches globally, and 2/3 of all of the global breaches were attributed to human error. Not sophisticated, brilliant cyber criminals. Remember, they're evil and lazy. Not sophisticated hacking. We left the doors open. We turned on the alarm system and the side window was left open. That's basically what happened. Or we let them in. In the case of a substation, an engineer went to a conference, got a free thumb drive, plugged it into the substation, and took them offline for 3 weeks. So I'm saying, people love free stuff. I had one of my guys say to me once at the White House, we were cleaning something up. No names will be mentioned. Oh, that's my time to get to Q&A. I always remind myself, it's time to do a Q&A. So just 2 more things real quick, and then we'll get into the Q&A piece. And I remember we were cleaning up a mess. Wasn't too bad. I won't name any names. And he said, ma'am, we're never going to run out of things to do. And I said, why is that? And he said, because there's no patch for human stupidity. And I thought, you know, what makes these guys brilliant makes them socially awkward. But anyways, so I do want to talk to you a little bit about the Internet of Things, just to plant the seed. Just like I planted the seed earlier about two-factor authentication, you know, sending a code to your phone may not work after a couple years. So if that's something you want to use with your clients, just understand they're going to figure out how to break that code on that as well. So just be prepared for that. That doesn't mean don't use it, just be prepared. So I'm just kind of planning. If I only talk to you about headlines that happen in the paper, I'm only doing like 1/3 my job. That's lazy. You can read the paper on your own, right? I need to talk to you about things you may not be thinking about. So on the Internet of Things, how many of you have heard that buzzword? Not a lot. Okay. So you're going to notice it now, and that's another cocktail party term that will make you look so cool. Okay, so the Internet of Things are basically devices talking to the internet. Once you program them, they really don't require your human intervention. It's like HAL, right? Or it's like the Borg, or it's like if you watched, what was that? WALL-E. If you watched WALL-E, the computer in WALL-E, it's kind of like that idea, but it's supposed to be helpful and not creepy. But the Internet of Things, so some of the things that are concerning me is I'm seeing them enter into the workplace and into the home where a lot of your employees may be working from home and accessing sensitive and confidential data. Now, am I saying you shouldn't do that? No, but if there's certain things that are sensitive and confidential, you want to make sure they're not talking to like the latest and greatest technology. Why is that? Because typically security follows later. So the Internet of Things, for example, can be robots on a manufacturing floor, right? A lot of them are programmable, and then you don't really need humans. Data centers. There's a lot of data centers that are called lights out. Basically, the robots manage everything. Then there's toilets that are actually connected to the internet, right? I'm not kidding. So they're Bluetooth enabled, so if you're germophobic, you can flush remotely. And supposedly, from a health perspective, you can keep track of things, but I stopped reading there. Just a little too much detail for me. But I think about being in a convention center like this, and what if they move to the Internet of Things, and then simultaneously somebody hacks in, prank or terrorism, and starts flushing the toilets all at the same time? Right? Pun or no pun intended, that's a real mess, right? Okay, so you have to be thinking about if you're introducing the Internet of Things into your physical infrastructure, whether it's your house or at work, you have to be thinking about what could the impact be if there was a hack into that. Could it talk to our most sensitive and critical assets? Okay, so you have to be thinking ahead and be thinking about that. Now, a couple of things I want to make sure that you do. Now, I know maybe not the greatest example to use is the Secret Service right now. I think they're getting a bad rap. They're really dedicated men and women. But what is the primary job of Secret Service? Protect the president. Why? Constitution says, right? So continuity of government. President, vice president, most critical assets. So if I'm on the South Lawn, I'm going to ask this table to respond to this question, okay? This is your dilemma of the day. So I'm on the South Lawn. I'm like 50 feet from the president. Secret Service sees a gun, but it's actually trained on me. Should they, beloved mother of 3, wife, should they stop that sniper from shooting me while I'm next to the president? They hesitated. It's really sweet. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say no. They shouldn't stop the sniper from shooting you. Why? Yeah, I'm not the top 2 most critical asset, but again, current issues aside, being within proximity of the president, aren't I, as an asset that's not as important, a little safer, right? Other than fence climbers and the Salahis who broke into a party. I mean, it's hard to get in there, right? It's hard to get in there. So I want you to be thinking in your organizations, what are your top 2 most critical assets? Why do I ask you to focus on 2? Because if I tell you 3, you'll come up with a list of 5. Then you start boiling the ocean. Get focused, people. Okay, president and vice president of digital assets. Then I want you to take your staff meetings. How many of you love your staff meetings? If your boss is here, raise your hand. It's just a career thing to do. Okay, so most of you probably don't love your staff meetings. Take that staff meeting. Focus on practicing a digital disaster, naming those top 2 assets. You don't need fancy consultants. I mean, we're cool, but I mean, you don't need fancy consultants to do this. You get index cards. You tell everybody, don't peek. You have marketing, not IT, facilitate the discussion. Why marketing? They're always focused on the customer. Okay, so marketing or customer service should always run these conversations. IT should be one seat at the table. HR needs to be there, CFO needs to be there, legal needs to be there. Name those top 2 most critical assets, gain agreement. It can be a little touchy sometimes, which is why I recommend you do it over beer. I just think it goes so much better that way. All right, so you're gonna get that takeaway packet that'll help you name those digital assets, so it'll give you the agenda for that meeting. It's gonna help you practice that digital doomsday. It's gonna talk to you about some of my favorite go-to resources for training and policies and procedures, how to tune technology, how to talk to your vendors, and also think about sort of security in your specific supply chain. So with that, I'd like to open it up for Q&A. There's gonna be roving mics coming around. Please wait for a mic or feel free to just run up to the stage and you can take over the microphone. And I will start asking questions in 60 seconds if nobody asks me a question. Oh, there's somebody over there. There you go.
Do you have any thoughts or concerns about agencies accepting Apple Pay or even worse, perhaps maybe Bitcoin?
I'm sorry, one more time on the tail end of that. Do you have concerns?
Concerns agencies accepting Apple Pay or perhaps even something like Bitcoin?
Currencies like Bitcoin as well. You know, I don't necessarily. What I would say is you want to ask, what business problem am I trying to solve? So do I have a demographic that this is a preferred method of payment? Or do I, from a cost perspective, this is what I want to solve? And then once you figure out the business problem you're trying to solve, then you want to make sure you ask the security and privacy questions. So 1, how do we protect the privacy of the people making those payments? And 2, you know, am I following all my regulatory requirements? And then the third is, what is the security? And knowing that everything is hackable, what will the vendor guarantee me they will do in the event of a breach? How much do they own the responsibility versus me? Do they have cyber liability insurance? Will they enact their policy versus me? How does crisis PR happen? Do we have a shared responsibility? So you want to make sure you negotiate all that up front before you adopt some of those newer payment strategies. But I mean, I think even with Bitcoin, there are reputable Bitcoin currency exchanges that you can use. I mean, you just want to make sure you pick the right one. I mean, some of them are kind of obvious that they're not reputable. I mean, you know, things like, you know, you use Bitcoin, buy and sell your illegal guns here. I mean, it's kind of obvious on those. But then there's some other ones you can actually see. They've like literally been certified, New York Stock Exchange and other things like that. But I say, yeah, I mean, especially if you have a demographic that wants kind of these newer payment methods, just do your due diligence. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
Come close.
Watch what you ask for, right?
No, at home, we've been getting these messages on our computers at home and saying, call this number, there's a threat, or the bank says to call them and all this kind of stuff. And we have the malware. We have those things. So is there anything that we can do in addition to having what we have to protect ourselves?
Are you an Apple or a Mac house? I mean, I'm sorry, you see my bias. Are you an Apple or a Mac house? Are you a Microsoft or an Apple?
Well, I just got a MacBook Air, and I don't get those messages at all. But my husband and my kids, they have the other stuff.
The Microsoft
Yeah.
platform. So the other stuff, yeah, the non-Apple. Are you Apple or non-Apple? So what I would say is there's a couple things. One, just doing what you're doing is a great first step, which is question. Is this really real? So we call that scareware when they do that, when you get that pop-up that says click here. The second thing, though, is if you, so on the Windows side, on Microsoft side, they actually have a help center you can go to that says, I think I have malware or spyware, and there's removal kits there that are free. Mm-hmm. And on the Mac side, you have the same thing. The other thing I would say is if you're encrypting your data, if for some reason someone were to be tricked in your household and actually click on those, if you're using encryption, you can use FileVault on the Apple or BitLocker. Then even if they get in, you've sort of minimized some of your damages.
Okay.
If you're looking for something else to add, we've actually had some good, we don't sell any products, so I don't have kickbacks or anything like that. we have actually had really good conversations with the Sophos team, S-O-P-H-O-S. And one of the things they said is if you're willing to put up with a little bit of like quirkiness, like bugs and stuff, their free product is actually the latest and greatest. And the reason why it's buggy is they literally see something bad and they just throw the code in to block it, and they test it out. So if you're willing to be a guinea pig, you can use Sophos for the Mac or for Microsoft.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Do we have other questions out here? I can't tell.
Hi, I'm here. My question to you is, our district was recently infected with the CryptoLocker. Is that what it's called?
Oh, boy.
And I wanted to discuss, or have you discussed, the risks of employees plugging their cell phones into the computer to actually charge it or keep it charged all day, and the risks of getting it that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways for CryptoLocker to get into your organization. So a couple of things. There are sometimes some remedies depending on which version of CryptoLocker you have. And so the first thing I would say is, like, don't immediately like shut off your computer. Like, call your IT department and tell them to call law enforcement, because on FBI's InfraGard website, they actually have remedies for some of the latest ransomware. So you can actually go to the website to try and use those remedies to unlock the computer. The second thing I would say is, and I know this sounds really old school, but having regular backups of your computer is a great way to just laugh in the face of cybercrime, because you can literally just wipe your hard drive and get rid of it and then put your data back on from the day before. The CryptoLocker and some of the other ones are fairly serious. I mean, you literally cannot, until you pay these bozos, and now you've handed them over your credit card data to do this, get the keys to unlock your data, which could be devastating. It could be family photos of your kids since they were babies that you don't have backups, all the way to, at work, client data and sensitive data. The bring your own device to work has also added kind of a new dirty device into the network. So one assumption I always have is, whether it's a corporate device or personal, we call it dirty. We just assume it's infected. But if you have that mindset that you assume every device that walks in and plugs into your network's infected, then you think differently about how you treat your data. It'd be like if you're sitting here and you assumed everybody else but you had the flu, wouldn't you behave differently? So I'm not saying behave that way. But in sort of a corporate network kind of way, when you think about your most critical assets, if you assume everything that wants to talk to this is infected, so I have to protect it, I think differently about user IDs and passwords that are allowed to touch it. And are they public facing? Like, does anybody even know those user ID and passwords in the general Joe Q and Sally Q public? And you start thinking differently. Those dirty devices that are now plugging into corporate devices, talking to the network because you're charging them and that are syncing up, there's different things that your IT department can do to basically let them charge their device, but lock out introducing what's on the device in being ported back into the network. But that all has to be part of your enterprise strategy. But it is something, again, back to that education and awareness, talking to your employees about the different points of presence that cybercrime can get into your organization. I found, too, the most effective way is to talk to them about how to protect themselves at home, and then they'll do a better job protecting you at work. So great question. Anybody else? I think there's one over here.
I just had a quick question. There's an opportunity to offer LifeLock to employees at a discount. What do you think of LifeLock?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of great services out there, LifeLock being one of them. There's a lot of things that you can do for yourself for free. So, and there's a lot of things you can do in your personal life for free, right? You can mow your own lawn. You can look at the news on your own. You can clean your own house. You can cook at home and not eat out, right? But then sometimes people make the choices of, well, I kind of want somebody to mow my lawn because I'm not going to keep up with it the way a lawn service would. Or you might say, I'm going to eat out once a week because that's kind of a treat not to have to keep up with it in my busy life. And so services like LifeLock do things for you that you could do for yourself, but you probably don't have the time. So I think, LifeLock is one. There's identity theft protection. There's ID 911. ID 911. There's a couple of them that I think have done a nice job, and we've actually talked to them and been in their operations center And everything's hackable, so you are giving them a lot of your data, but they do a decent job thinking about how to protect your privacy. Yes? A mic's coming your way.
Hi, I just learned of a new service called LifePass, where you can actually log on and it types your passwords or something into websites. What do you think of that?
So name the app again.
I think it was LifePass.
LifePass.
Or, yeah.
There's several
Couple of
different applications that'll do that for you. So again, I would go back to make sure you're reading the privacy and security policy of any of those. And there are some benefits to that. One is if it encourages you to use a different password on everything and to use strong passwords that are generated that aren't like your mascot, high school mascot's name, I think that's a good thing. Everything is hackable, so you want to be thinking about, well, what do I use this for versus not? And then what do I know about this company? So we get asked this question a lot, and we actually have a method that we use, and if anybody wants to see me after this is over, I'll show it to you, but we actually use a combination of software and physical. So we actually use something called LastPass. Again, I'm not selling any products, and then we actually have a physical RFID key that we say you can't unlock the vault to fill in my passwords unless I plug this in. So that way we know, at least for now, until cyber criminals figure that out and it's economically beneficial for them, we've got a method for helping protect how we log in and not having to remember 500 passwords.
Maybe it was LastPass, not LifePass, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, LastPass. Yeah, they
LastPass,
have a business platform and a consumer platform. I don't know the consumer side all that well, but the business side, we've tested it for several clients who do business overseas and very sensitive transactions, and we've been pleased with the results. Again, everything's hackable, so that's just my caveat to everything. That's like my add-on sentence. But we've been pleased with, and we've had conversations with that company, we've been pleased with the way they do things right now. Anybody else? Oh, there's one back here. I'll make sure my contact, in case anybody needs to reach me when you're doing the takeaway packet. Yes?
Earlier you mentioned about cyber liability insurance, and my question is basically what cyber liability insurance and indemnification language do you usually require of your vendors, and how do you determine the dollar amount?
Great question. So a couple of things on cyber liability insurance. So we worked with, I'm going to tell you like a quick story because this is not covered. So I'll just kind of shorten the story a little bit. We got a call from a company. We were not working for the parent company. We were working for the sub. And the sub asked us to help the parent company literally find their website. It literally went missing. And the way it went missing was a human error made on the mistake of the IT department, and the website was being held for ransom. And when we called the FBI to talk to them about the case, and we told them the IP address, the country, the company we figured out that was holding it for ransom, tracing everything back, they said, out of our jurisdiction, we could probably do a case, but might be a year or two. If they need their website back, they're going to have to pay ransom. So guess what? Your cyber liability insurance policy, unless you've asked for this, probably doesn't cover your website being held ransom. I'm just kind of saying. And it probably doesn't cover CryptoLocker encrypting. So you need to make sure you're looking at it all the time as the newest and latest techniques and threats come out of the evil cyber criminal world to make sure those coverages are in there. Some of the standard things that we think companies should be asking for is one, the vendors that you do business with, ask for a copy of their cyber liability insurance policy and require crisis PR, breach notification lawyers, breach notification mailings. You should not have to bear the brunt of that whole cost if your vendor supplier is the reason why you were breached. And then for yourself personally, of course, those as a minimum. But my advice to you would also be to stand up in there, have the cost associated with standing up a breach notification response center for all of your customers. A place where people can physically call. You will make the noise level on that breach go away so quickly if you literally say, we've had a breach, we're investigating, we apologize, And then don't sound like everybody else. I think it sounds so lame when you're like, and we're offering 1 free year of credit monitoring. I'm like, really? Cyber criminals are not that stupid. They'll wait 2 years, 13 months. Like, fantastic, guys. And it sounds so lame. So instead, when you come out and you say, we're so sorry, and we have a 24/7 operations center, 1-800, call us now, whatever the number is, and we're going to answer everybody's questions. And we're going to get you to the right place because we care. Like, make sure that is in there. So it's all about thinking about when the worst happens, how can I instill customer confidence? How do I make sure that 30% of them don't leave me, which is what they said in a recent survey. Anyone they have financial or healthcare transactions with of any kind, if there's a breach, 30% say, I've either left or I will. I don't know about you, I can't afford to lose 30% of my clients. That would hurt me deeply to lose 30%. So those are the types of things I would say in there. And then on coverages, I would look at your cost of doing business and literally negotiate with your underwriter the cost of doing business. Super question. Yes, sir. I'm looking at my I want to make sure I don't go too far over, so you'll tell me if it's like last question, one question, right? Okay. Thanks.
First of all, I think I have a virus on my laptop. Can I leave it with you? So the other day I was driving to work, and I listened to the news pretty much every day, and they were just saying how Kmart got hacked. So then I realized this is becoming the new norm. It's not making breaking news anymore. Like Target was the first big one, the first big event. Like now they're not in the top events of the day. So how do we all not confirm like it's not the new norm anymore? What should we do as consumers to make sure that this is not becoming the new norm and we should accept it like the new norm?
Yeah, I think you ask a great question. I think what we all have to realize is both at work and at home that we have to be responsible for security. It's not the IT team's job anymore. They can't keep up with it. And in your personal life, my recommendation as a consumer is there's a couple different things you can do. I mean, there's some that are obvious, which is your anti-malware, your anti-spamware. Having, I call it good digital hygiene habits. So safe browsing, turning on in your browser settings and on your operating system settings, they will literally warn you if you're going to known unsafe websites, even if like a current website, like the New York Times had poison search links. And once that was known, before it was totally taken down, the safe search browsers were telling people, you don't want to go to the New York Times, really? I mean, they literally were alerting people. So leveraging tools like that, obviously staying up on the latest trends is also helpful. Another piece that I recommend is having a different email address for each part of your life, and this is at work too. So for example, we all have these public-facing email addresses. But if you're handling client-sensitive information, do you really want that publicly available email address to be the one that's going back and forth with that? No, set up a separate domain and set of emails. Are those hackable? You betcha. But they're not as obvious to cyber criminals. Same thing in your personal life. So the email address you give to your kid's school and your newspaper subscription, don't give that one to your bank. Don't give that one to your healthcare. So start segregating those pieces of your life. Sensitive transactions have these specific email addresses, and if you see weird traffic on those, you know you have a problem. Same thing with passwords. You can go with simple passwords on your magazine subscriptions. The way I look at it is look, if cyber criminals break into my Wall Street Journal and my Southern Living, they're going to be much better read, they may learn to cook, and they may change their evil ways, right? But they're not going to be able to use the same email address and password to get in the other part of my life. So you just need to be thinking about strategies of what are my most valuable assets, and therefore, do I let certain apps talk to them, certain devices talk to them, and how do I start shielding them and segregating them from everything else? Free Wi-Fi is another great example. So many of you probably connected to the free Wi-Fi here. I was in a corporate coffee shop once, and I said, oh, do you guys have free Wi-Fi, like it's a corporate program? And they said, no, it was before a lot of coffee shops had free Wi-Fi. And I said, well, so you have a geek who does coffee and free Wi-Fi. And your Wi-Fi, and she said, no. And she said, well, she figured out I wasn't gonna go away, and she points out the window, and she says, do you see those condos over there? So I look and I said, yeah, I see them. And she says, Josh lives there. Josh, she said, yeah, he was in here one day and he realized he could see his home network. So he cut a deal with our manager. He renamed his home network to our coffee shop. You get free Wi-Fi, he gets free coffee. Isn't that cool? Yeah, toothbrush in the hotel lobby. Remember that analogy? And I said, it's something all right. And I'm looking at everybody in the coffee shop working happily on free Wi-Fi going, oh my gosh, I always bring my own Wi-Fi. I never use free Wi-Fi. So there's different strategies you can use. Now, is using free Wi-Fi to surf, the news or a celebrity report okay? Probably. But are you going to do a banking transaction on that? I wouldn't. So those would be the things I would do. I would look at sort of that risk versus reward trade-off. Do I have time for one more? We're done. I'm going to be around. There's my contact information. If you're doing the takeaway packet and you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'll be around, so if there's more questions, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.